have a phone call. You specifically have a cell phone call. Do you want to answer it? Have you been working out? How's your bicep strength? Early cell phones were ginormous. They were so big they required their very own carrying kit, like a little suitcase. But at the time, they seemed awesome, right? The very idea of taking your phone with you out into the world was so amazing that who cares if you needed to hook it up to a car battery and put it in a suitcase to do it? Even though the early cell phones were so clunky and so expensive, the idea evolved quickly. From the suitcase nuke back in 1985, cell phones just got smaller and smaller and smaller until they actually had to start growing again in order to factor in how much computing and audiovisual work we do on them now. So it has taken a long time, but we have made the leap. And who knows what they're going to be like in the future. But the distance this one device has traveled in the last 30 years has not just changed that device, it has changed the way we lived. And we are at a point right now where it feels like we may be at the start of another period of existential change driven by technology, where the technology now is clunky and awkward, but if you can imagine your way around that clunkiness and awkwardness, you can see that the idea is transformative. And if the tech leaps forward on this device the way that cell phone tech leapt forward, then these guys may change the way we live too. This is 3D printing. I'm not sure if we will call it 3D printing forever. It's kind of an awkward term, but that's what they call it now. The basic concept is just as a printer now uses ink and light to create a two-dimensional object on paper, these computer-driven machines can use plastics and resins instead of inks to create three-dimensional objects instead of just pictures. With a 3D printer, anybody can become a small-scale manufacturer of anything. The set of instructions or specifications that map out the shape of the object that you're going to create using your printer, that comes in the form of a computer file. You plug in that file, you leave the 3D printer to do its work, and then presto, you've got your object that you programmed it to make for you. Now, there are limitations as to the materials that your 3D printer can make your thing out of, but you can manufacture something yourself. These printers are still pretty slow and clumsy and expensive, usually in the $1,000 or several $1,000 range, but they have gone from being weird and futuristic sounding devices that can only create very basic, simple objects to already creating very real, very advanced objects, like, say, a car, a 3D printed car, or how about a 3D printed prosthetic limb, or how about a 3D printed gun? The part of this gun that was printed using a 3D printer is the one that's a weird color there. It's the part that's called the lower receiver, the green part, see? The lower receiver, in layman's terms, is the guts of the gun. It's like the engine of the gun. And for legal purposes, it's the part of the gun that's registered and regulated. You can traffic in all the other parts of the gun, like the muzzle and all that stuff, as if they were just any other piece of metal. But that lower receiver, that is the legally crucial component. That's the part with the serial number. That is the heart of the gun. And shortly after Newtown, we reported on this show on an initiative to use 3D printing to make lower receivers for assault-style rifles at home. People have started to make lower receivers for AK-47 style weapons at home using a file that you can download on the internet. You can actually download it right here. I have one on my computer, which makes me wonder about the next time I have one of those things where NBC comes and checks my computer. This is what happened when the folks who printed that lower receiver fitted other parts of a gun that are not regulated the way a lower receiver is, fitted other parts of a gun onto that piece that they printed with a 3D printer. This is the video they released of themselves firing bullets out of it. And as you can see, the 3D printed gun failed and busted apart after it fired about 6 rounds, which makes it, yes, a gun, but the technical term for what kind of gun it is that it is a crappy gun because it blew apart after 6 rounds. But this kind of thing is probably not going to stay a crappy gun for long. Probably won't stay a crappy gun for long. That's what I said the day we broadcast that on December 17th, which was 3 days after Newtown. This week, the folks who 3D printed that lower receiver, the one that failed after 6 rounds, the one I called the crappy gun, this week they unveiled this one. Look at it, not failing. According to them, this new lower receiver withstood more than 660 rounds of high-velocity bullets. They're using a drum magazine for the bullets here. That's the round thing you can see on the base of the gun. That holds dozens of bullets. They only stopped firing with what they say was their 3D printed homemade lower receiver because they ran out of ammunition. But they claim that this is not a store-bought gun or even a metal gun. They claim this lower receiver is the one they 3D printed out of plastic or resin, and they say they believe it could have easily withstood 1,000 rounds if only they'd had more bullets to be able to keep testing. Obviously, the guys who made this are very proud of what they have done. And they are trying to publicize what they are doing because they want the attention. In particular, they want the political attention. When they first posted the video that we just showed you there on their blog, the caption under the video said they welcome Congress back from vacation. They also say, we've got the printed AR lowers figured out. They say, wither gun control. These guys are doing this for political reasons. They want guns to be not only unregulated, but unregulatable. 300 million guns are not enough. More is the solution. But whether you agree with them or not, whether you find what they are doing exciting or terrifying or both, you have to admit that this does raise all sorts of interesting questions about law enforcement and gun laws in this country. I mean, how do you go about regulating a gun if everybody can make one themselves at home alone? One that can shoot 1,000 rounds. There's no serial number on that lower receiver, and honestly, nobody bought it or sold it. It's homemade. How is law enforcement in this country going to grapple with homemade, high-powered weapons? What will they do when these guys inevitably distribute the computer code for 3D printing a fully automatic machine gun? The government agency that will have to deal with the challenges of this new technology as it comes into its own is, of course, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF. Last month, when President Obama unveiled his proposed gun reforms at the White House, one of the things he asked Congress to do was confirm his nominee to run the ATF, a man named Todd Jones. Todd Jones has been acting as deputy director of the ATF for the past couple of years. President Obama asked Congress to stop hindering law enforcement. That was his phrase, hindering. And he called Congress out for failing to allow anybody to be confirmed as director of the ATF for 6 years now. This week, we got news that even that part of what President Obama proposed on guns, even just asking to confirm a director of the law enforcement agency that's concerned with federal gun laws, Republicans in Congress may oppose that, too. They do not want there to be someone officially running that agency. After 6 years of not having anyone run that part of law enforcement, why start now? Republicans increasingly make the case that we should not have any new gun laws, even after Sandy Hook, because we do not need new gun laws. What we need is better enforcement of the laws we've got. We don't do a good enough job enforcing the gun laws that we have. They've made that case over and over and over again. They made it again this week in the hearings on the new proposed assault weapons bill. At the same time, those same Republicans are now signaling a continued unwillingness, I should say, to confirm anyone to run the agency that is responsible for enforcing the gun laws that we do have. They have been stopping anyone from running that agency since 2006. They still think that is the right thing to do for the country. Maybe watching this 3D printed lower receiver spewing out more than 600 rounds might afford some motivation on this issue. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again Monday. Now it's time for the last word. Have a great weekend.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We do not give up. Expect surprises. Subscribe.